Today we're going to be talking about my experience with the Sigma 70-200 f2.8 sport lens over the past 6 months. So let's get into it. First off, this video is being recorded with the Sigma 70-200 f2.8 zoom lens on the Blackmagic Pocket 6K. Now the camera is about 20 feet away from me, so this video is shot around 135mm, so this is what that looks like. Now as far as cameras that I've used this lens with, I've used it with the Blackmagic Pocket 6K as well as the Canon EOS R7. So it works well with both cameras, just make sure to get the adapter when using this camera. Now let's talk about my experience using this lens. It is a bit heavy, but that's fine considering the features that it has and the fact that it is weather sealed. As far as weather sealing goes, the lens mechanism is completely built in and does not extend, which means that nothing will get inside of it. Also, this lens is very scratch resistant and I haven't had any issues with the build quality. It's a very well built lens. Autofocus is quite fast and works well with the Canon R7, but sometimes it will go through the entire range of the focus, so it isn't ideal, but for the price point, it's very good. The built-in stabilization is amazing and has 3 modes, off, 1, and 2. 1 is the smoothest, but sometimes can drift, and mode 2 won't drift, but it isn't quite as stable. I usually use 2 because it won't drift, but if you get the lens, you can switch back and forth very easily with a built-in switch. There's also some focus modes, so you can change whether it's on autofocus or manual, and during the whole time, you do have manual control over the focus. So when it's using autofocus, you can still grab the ring and move it. Also, this lens has built-in buttons that you can program in the camera that you are using. So for example, I have mine to activate silent shutter, so at any time that I want to activate that, I can just press the button on the side of the lens and it works. There are 3 of these buttons, they all function the same way, so that is great to have in a lens, and I wish more lenses had that feature. Note when using that feature that your camera will have to support it. So cameras like the Blackmagic Pocket 6K that I'm using right now do not support that. Most mainstream cameras should be able to do that. For example, my Canon R7 does support that. So you should be fine with that feature as long as you're using popular cameras. For example, Canon's, Sony's, Nikon's, or Sigma's own cameras. Now, as far as the zoom goes, it's 70-200mm at a constant aperture of f2.8, so that is great for a zoom lens. And the only issue that I've had with it is that there's a lot of friction to the zoom wheel, so if you get a motor to motorize the zoom, you may want to consider getting a more powerful motor because it is harder to turn. Now, this is acceptable considering the lens is weather sealed, so that's just something to note. There are also some custom modes that you can use, but you will have to get the additional USB docking station to configure those. Additionally, the lens comes with a nice bag and lens hood, as well as 2 lens caps for each end. As far as optical quality goes, the lens is very sharp, and I haven't been able to see any chromatic aberration. There will be some, but it hasn't been detectable to me. Also, there are 11 aperture blades, so bokeh is nice and rounded. And because this lens has a constant aperture of f2.8, it is a very bright lens and is very versatile. So if you're doing wildlife shooting or shooting in the dark, it's a great lens for that. Also, if you're doing wider shots of landscape or are shooting in very bright environments, it does go down to f22, so quite dark there. The lens has full frame coverage, so if you're using it with full frame bodies or using it with crop sensor lenses, it will work. Now when using crop sensor cameras, make sure to consider the fact that it is a crop sensor, so that will multiply the zoom ratio. So for example, if you have a crop factor of 1.7, 100mm becomes 170mm. So something to consider depending on which camera you get it with. The only thing about this lens that is a downside, in my opinion, is the rotating collar is not easily removable. You can remove the foot of it, but if you want to remove it completely, you cannot do that. The annoyance of it is easily fixable by rotating it out of the way if you're doing handheld shooting, but it does have the assurance of never falling off because it isn't removable. Also, the bottom of the tripod collar is an Arca Swiss plate, so if you're using tripods with that mount, you do not need to add an additional base plate to that. There is a quarter thread on the bottom of that tripod collar, so you can mount it to normal tripod plates if you need to. And I would always recommend when using a lens of this size to mount your camera on the tripod by the lens itself, because it far exceeds the weight of the camera at 3.97 pounds, and it is better on the mount and the camera to be held that way. Obviously, lens mounting options will be different depending on the size of camera you are using, so just take note of that when using larger cameras or smaller cameras to just mount it the most efficient way you can. There are many different versions of this lens available for different lens mounts, including Canon EF and Nikon F. So depending on which system you are using, you should be covered with this lens, either with the lens directly or with an adapter. That's pretty much it for this review, and here is some test footage shot on the Sigma 70-200 f2.8 with the Blackmagic Pocket 6K and the Canon EOS R7. Well, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing, that would help me out a lot. If you have any questions about this lens or any of the other equipment I use, please leave it in the comments below, and I will answer your question. Also, if you enjoyed this video and would like to support me, there is a link down below to my Patreon page, so you can support me that way if you want. Well, that's it for this video, and thank you for watching.